Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. While the ignition of one's soul power couldn't usually be controlled, a person's spirit would still remain even if he was dead. However, igniting one's spiritual power was definitely uncontrollable, and both the body and spirit of a person would be completely destroyed. Is this guy crazy? Did we even say we were going to kill him? Huo Yuhao didn't know that Huo Yuhao had made such an unhesitant and determined decision mainly for two reasons. First, he felt that he owed Wang Qiu'er too much. She was here to rescue him in this time of crisis, and he felt that he was obligated to ensure that she was safe. In order to send Wang Qiu'er away safely, he needed sufficient strength. Secondly, he felt that Huo Yuhao was too threatening. Huo Yuhao was reminded of how Feng Ling was turned into a madam, and he was afraid to end up like him. He would rather his body and spirit be destroyed than to become a second Feng Ling. That was also the more important reason why he was willing to die. He stepped out with his left leg, and his bright eyes turned gentler. A golden projection silently appeared behind him. Compared to Wang Qiu'er, this projection seemed a little more slender, and had straight hair. Wasn't this Wang Dong'er? She quietly flew forward and adopted a hugging posture, before she stuck close and fused with Huo Yuhao's body. During this process, she also flew past Wang Qiu'er's body. Wang Qiu'er shuddered, and a look of sadness flashed across her beautiful eyes. Even at this life-and-death moment, he still only has her in his heart. This projection of Wang Dong'er fused with Huo Yuhao, and his gaze turned even gentler. At this moment, to him, his enemies didn't seem to exist anymore. There was only a look of remembrance in his eyes. Remembrance was a magical thing. Huo Yuhao unleashed his fist of remembrance, which contained a surging feeling of remembrance. A fist with an indescribable color, but which yet seemed to shine with a special glow, was formed. Huo Yuhao didn't seem to have a target, and he just unleashed his fist into the air. However, all three of the evil soul masters, which comprised 2 title Doluo and 1 soul Doluo, felt as if Huo Yuhao's fist was unleashed towards them. An indescribable emotion instantly spread in their hearts. The 4th elder was the first to bear the brunt of Huo Yuhao's attack, as he was standing directly opposite Huo Yuhao. He straightened his netherworld sword, and his 7th soul ring shone. His body instantly turned into a streak of black light, and he fused with his sword. Following this, another tragic scream sounded. Among the 9 netherworld souls in the 4th elder's netherworld sword, the 2nd soul was crushed, and the earlier purplish sword projection surfaced again. Space shook like the strings of a violin, and the 4th elder's martial soul true body, which was this purplish netherworld sword, surged up. However, it was forced back into the original form of the 4th elder's sword and disappeared. In addition, the soul engineers from the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion in the air, who had already retreated quite some distance, also seemed to be infected by something. They started to tear up, and they couldn't control their emotions. They even couldn't control themselves in the air, and their soul tools started to fall from their hands. At this point, metal was raining down inside the city. At this moment, all of these soul engineers were all remembering their loved ones, and they lost their fighting spirit. This was the highest level of profundity of the Fist of Remembrance. There wasn't any outright force, but it influenced, controlled and even destroyed one's emotions. The stronger one's spiritual power was, the greater the influence on their emotions. This was especially applicable for those who shared a similar type of remembrance with Huo Yuhao. The 3rd elder had already raised his right arm, and was prepared to use a strong soul tool to destroy Huo Yuhao. However, it stopped in the air. He turned his gaze towards Nan Shui, who was right beside him. Remembrance was a magical thing. Right now, the person he yearned for the most was beside him. A blissful smile unwittingly appeared on his face. At this moment, he had already completely forgotten what he was doing here, and that he was supposed to attack Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao was dealt a larger blow than the 3rd elder. She and Huo Yun were twin sisters, and they suffered from similar circumstances. When Huo Yun's emotions changed, she would experience similar emotional changes, too. After she saw what Huo Yuhao presented to her through his imitation, her emotions were fluctuating even worse than her elder sister. Right now, all types of complex emotions erupted in her head. Wu Yun had been able to instinctively counterattack and defend herself. However, Wu Yu was completely motionless in the air, and in a daze as she stared at Huo Yuhao. All sorts of emotions were surging and changing continuously in her eyes. Compared to her, the fourth elder was under less influence. However, he was directly in front of Huo Yuhao's fist of remembrance. This fist was a perfect combination of spiritual and soul power, and it was infused with the feeling of remembrance. When it was unleashed, it was completely imprinted onto the fourth elder's martial soul true body. The sword intent of his purple sword was suppressed, and his sword was flung back amidst a piercing buzzing sound. He flew back several hundred meters before he managed to stabilize himself. Huo Yuhao didn't stop. When he unleashed his fist of remembrance, he had already forgotten everything about the outside world. The identical projection above him started to burn more brightly. It was the origin power in his spiritual sea that was burning. Otherwise, how could he possibly unleash such strong emotions and infect the two titled Doluo until they weren't able to hold their ground anymore? Huo Yuhao exerted force with his left foot, and he was lifted higher again. He lifted his right hand and pointed his index and middle fingers upward. A lustrous, bright glow instantly shot into the sky. A huge beam of sword light around 100 meters long and several dozen meters wide shot into the sky. This bright sword light seemed to pierce the sky. Wherever it passed, space distorted and would gently shake. Huo Yuhao's expression also started to change. The gentle look in his eyes turned into pain, and he pursed his lips tightly. His eyes had already turned wet, and his emotions seemed to completely enter another world. Remembrance, it started from thinking before it escalated to missing. Wang Donger's face flashed in Huo Yuhao's eyes. He suddenly felt that he was very blissful. Even if he had to die, he was able to die during his remembrance of Wang Donger. He was satisfied. This was probably the best result, considering the situation he was in. The majestic sword light descended from the sky. One's swordplay could only reach the peak if he handled his relationships well. This was Huo Yuhao's sword of longing, a sword which would never be forgotten. There was a target for this sword. Wu Yu. If not for the fact that Wu Yu had controlled Feng Ling, Huo Yuhao's almost perfect plan wouldn't have experienced such a huge problem. More importantly, Wu Yu's emotions were completely controlled by his fist of remembrance right now. This was his best breakthrough point. She was affected worse than the rest, because she was a spiritual type soul master. Her spirit of vengeance relied on boundless hatred. However, she was forced to experience the feeling of remembrance by Huo Yuhao at this moment. How could she avoid his sword of longing now, after being affected by his fist of remembrance earlier? Her spirit of vengeance sensed a huge crisis, and unleashed itself from her body to protect her. Wu Yu seemed to be getting a slow grip on her emotions, but it was all too late. Huo Yuhao's fusion with Wang Chioa, and his ignition of his spiritual sea had raised his strength to a standard above Wu Yu. The three ultimate howong skills had finally revealed the terrifying strength that they were meant to possess. Why didn't Huo Yuhao use the abilities that the Snow Empress, the Ice Empress and the Sky Dream Iceworm had conferred on him? It was because he had to continue to be connected to them if he used their abilities. If that happened, they wouldn't be able to separate from him after his death and fuse with Wang Chioa. This was why Huo Yuhao could only use the three skills that he had invented, the three ultimate howong skills. Huo Yuhao's sword of longing immediately tore her avenging spirit to pieces. Wherever this sword light passed, spots of bright light were left behind in the air. It was as if tears of remembrance had been scattered in the air. This shiny sword light flashed past Wu Yu's body before disappearing, and her body stiffened in the air. She drifted several meters back before stopping. The bloodshot look in her eyes faded away, and her gaze started to become similar to Huo Yuhao's. She was ultimately not as strong as her sister. Against Huo Yuhao's complete version of the three ultimate howong skills, she didn't manage to survive until his last skill. She was already sucked into the whirlpool of remembrance by the sword of longing. In the next instant, her body disintegrated, and was crushed before she turned into a pile of dust. She was reunited with her elder sister in another world. That majestic sword seemed to have slashed the sky apart. At this instant, Ma Xiaodao looked at the sky in the direction of Sunrise City, as if she had a premonition. That's not good. There's a fight in Sunrise City. It could be a fight involving titled Doluo, considering how strong the spiritual undulations are. Quick, let's return. Ma Xiaodao was frantic. After giving out her order, she immediately leapt up, and her wings fluttered forcefully, as she quickly proceeded back toward Sunrise City. Earlier, she kept on having bouts of uneasiness, as if she felt that something was going to happen. However, she kept on telling herself that it was probably because Huo Yuhao was about to be caught. She had also been thinking of a plan of action if Huo Yuhao was caught. Without the third and fourth elders, it was possible for Huo Yuhao and the others to kill the Zhong brothers if they coordinated well. It was just that the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion was nearby, and their leader, who was a Class 9 Soul Engineer, was very difficult to deal with. However, Ma Xiaodao suddenly felt that something wasn't right when the Sword of Longing swept across the sky. The reason why she was feeling uneasy wasn't because it originated from a distance, but because it came from behind her. Don't tell me that little brother didn't leave Sunrise City, and is still inside. How could Ma Xiaodao control her emotions with this thought lingering in her head? She quickly rushed away back to Sunrise City. Wu Yu was dead. She died just like that. She died without unleashing any of the fighting strength that she should possess. However, her death also jolted the third elder awake. The fourth elder was also flying back from afar. His eighth and ninth soul rings could be seen flashing. Huo Yuhao had gone into closed-door cultivation for several months, and fused all of his abilities. He had perfectly combined his spiritual and soul power through the connection of his emotions to form his three great skills, which were the strongest expression of his emotions. No matter how strong his opponents were, they would be infected by him if they weren't able to resist the invasion of his spiritual power. These three great skills were mainly supported by Huo Yuhao's spiritual power, because his spiritual cultivation had surpassed the rank of his soul power. When he completed his soul power fusion with Wang Qiu'er and unleashed his three great skills, he had already established himself in the league of the strongest individuals in this world. After unleashing his sword, Huo Yuhao was already crying. He retracted his palm to his waist before flipping it over. He formed the shape of a heart in the air, and all the lights were retracted at this instant. There was an additional heart at the center of his palm. It was a golden heart. Even the most dazzling gem in this world couldn't compare to the glow from this golden heart. This golden heart represented a sincere heart. It was filled with eternal love and remembrance. Huo Yuhao shut his eyes. At this moment, there was only one figure in his mind. There weren't any other people or things that could affect his state of mind. He was already deeply immersed in his thoughts of Wang Donga. Donga, Donga, Donga. He was gently calling in his heart. He seemed to see Wang Donga and how she had sacrificed her life for him without any hesitation. Donga, Donga. As he called, that shining, golden heart slowly moved forward as he pushed his palm forward. In the sky, the clouds experienced changes, and thunder rumbled. After pitch darkness filled the sky, it suddenly lit up. The lights came from an unknown origin, but they formed a heart shape. The signals from all the aerial surveillance soul tools that the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion had released again were all jumbled up. In the next moment, their internal formation arrays blew apart, and they were all destroyed. That huge and seemingly boundless heart resonated with the golden heart on Huo Yuhao's palm. Behind the heart in the sky, there seemed to be a beautiful face watching everything that was happening on the ground with a gentle gaze. Donga, I'll forever miss and bless you. Even if I go to another world, as long as there's still a trace of my spirit left, I'll always love you, Donga. As Huo Yuhao pushed his palm out, and the two hearts resonated with each other, it seemed as if countless flowing lights shone behind Huo Yuhao's back. There were only memories of him and Wang Donga within those flowing lights. Huo Yuhao's howong palm, a palm which would last eternally. This was the last strike of Huo Yuhao's three great skills. The chi of heaven and earth was overwhelming, and the feeling of remembrance was pure. The heart on Huo Yuhao's palm enlarged severalfold, and completely engulfed him and Wang Qiu'er. The two hearts between heaven and earth got closer and closer, and then merged together. At this moment, the third and fourth elders had to retreat rapidly, even with their cultivations. They could clearly sense that they would be critically hurt if they were touched by this heart-shaped light. The hearts combined in the sky, and formed a heart shape that was even brighter than the sun. It was perfectly flawless. The heart-shaped light suddenly retracted, and the huge heart, that was originally a few hundred meters in diameter, suddenly shrank to a diameter of only around 50 meters. In the next instant, this huge heart suddenly raised up a dazzling plume that shot into the distance. In the blink of an eye, both Huo Yuhao and Wang Qiu'er vanished without a trace. They weren't the only ones who disappeared. Nan Shuishui and Nan Qiuqiu, who were both restrained by the third elder's lightning god's binding earlier, had also disappeared. It was like the third elder's lightning god's binding was a joke in front of the howong palm. The third and fourth elders were both in a daze. Everything that had happened earlier was like a dream to them. It just wasn't believable anymore. Huo Yuhao and Wang Qiu'er were a soul king and soul sage. Among ordinary people, and even soul masters, they possessed rather extraordinary fighting strength. However, how many opponents did the two of them face? They had fought more than 100 elite soul engineers, a class 9 soul engineer, a title Doluor, and a soul Doluor who was a strong, spiritual type evil soul master. What was the eventual result? The soul Doluor was killed, the elite soul engineers fell from the sky, and were in critical condition, and the two title Doluor could only watch helplessly as they escaped. They couldn't even stop them. No one would believe this. All of this was too weird and shocking. The fourth elder flew over in front of the third elder and said with lingering fear, "What ability did he just reveal?" It was frightening. "I have a feeling that I would have been killed if he used all 3 moves on me earlier." The third elder patted the fourth elder's shoulder and said, "Forget it, he's doomed no matter what abilities he has since he's ignited his spiritual sea. Let's go, too. We don't know how the Holy Lady and the others are." Yes, Huo Yuhao was doomed. Huo Yuhao's gaze was filled with gentleness. Nan Qiuqiu, Nan Shuishui, and Wang Qiu'er could clearly see Huo Yuhao's face as they were protected by the heart-shaped light, but they couldn't sense any resistance from the outside world. Above Huo Yuhao, that identical figure was still burning. However, it looked a little illusory now compared to before. The 3 ladies knew that Huo Yuhao would be completely destroyed if it finished burning. "Are you doing this just to tell me that only she exists in your heart?" Wang Qiu'er was still resting on Huo Yuhao's back and hugging him tightly. For some reason, she had become extremely fragile now. She was like a glass vase that could be smashed into pieces any time. She no longer seemed strong, or possessed any fighting spirit. Huo Yuhao shook his head gently and said, "No, Qiu'er. It's not only her in my heart. You also exist in my heart. It's just that I didn't dare to admit it." Wang Qiu'er's body shook tremendously, and she suddenly lifted her head from Huo Yuhao's back. She had always been a resilient person, but her voice was trembling now. "I exist in your heart." Huo Yuhao nodded gently and pulled Wang Qiu'er in front of him. He gently embraced her and let her lean on his body. "Yes, I have both you and Donga in my heart. I just didn't dare to admit it all this while. Perhaps I'm the reason why Donga is asleep, and why you are in such pain. If I had faced myself earlier, things might have been different. Humans are emotional creatures. I could tell that you were fond of me. When I found out that you plucked another yearning heartbroken grass for me, my heart eventually still opened up for you. I tried to hide it and not face it, and keep all my love for Donga. However, I can't deny its existence. I'm sorry, Qiu'er. I'm a bad person. I've hurt both you and Donga. If heaven gives me one more chance, I'll only have 2 choices. Either I'll choose to forsake the both of you, or I'll think of a way to keep both of you by my side. I won't let any of you go. Qiu'er, do you know? I'm actually very happy now. I really miss Donga. I really wish to return to see her. I've already planned everything out. After this mission is over, I'll return to the Clear Sky sect to see her. However, I'm afraid that I can't go now. If you have the time, visit her on my behalf. If she wakes up, tell her that you are her elder sister, and that everything that happened was just a dream. Help her to forget me. Yuhao, Wang Chua cried. This was the first time Huo Yuhao had seen her so helpless, after all this time that he had known her. However, there was a sense of bliss in her tears. Huo Yuhao hugged her tighter and muttered, "For some reason, I feel that both you and Donga are the same person at times. However, you showed up at different periods of my life. It would have been better if only you or Donga existed." "Chua, I'm sorry." Wang Chua gently shook her head. "Don't say sorry. I should be the one to apologize. I was the one who forced myself into your life. Without me, all of this might not have happened. In fact, I already knew what you thought earlier. I knew that you wanted to sacrifice yourself to save me. However, I still hated you and your heartlessness, until you told me that you have me in your heart. I can feel your sincerity. My love for you has finally been repaid." Wang Chua stood up straight in Huo Yuhao's embrace as she spoke. She was tall in the first place, and so they were staring into each other's eyes, as she grasped Huo Yuhao's shoulders with both hands. "Have you kissed Donga before, Yuhao?" Wang Chua smiled, her exceptionally enchanting face shining radiantly, like 100 blooming flowers. Huo Yuhao nodded lightly. Wang Chua gradually closed her eyes, and her lengthy and curly eyelashes touched her lower eyelids. She raised her head gently, and her red lips seemed exquisite and alluring as she whispered, "Kiss me." Huo Yuhao chuckled. He could feel his own weakness. All the strength and might that he had possessed throughout his entire lifetime was coming to an end. They had traveled more than 50 kilometers out within such a short time. Not even Title Doluo could find them unless they executed a large-scale hunt. An unspeakable warmth and passion instantly traveled from Chua's lips. Huo Yuhao was already extremely weak, and he suddenly felt as if he were a little lost. And it was in this moment that, as they kissed each other, Chua's forehead was facing forward and pressed tightly against his. Their opened eyes of destiny touched. In that instant, Huo Yuhao felt as if his entire brain was about to explode, and strange scenes flashed by in his mind one after another. He was looking at a large, dense forest, where countless ancient trees that reached high into the sky blocked off the sunlight completely. In that world where plants were everywhere, there was a small golden figure lying prostrate on the ground. This is. Haven't you always been curious about why Donga and I look identical, and why I look so similar to the goddess of light produced by your martial soul fusion skill with her? The reason is because I presented myself before the two of you according to what the goddess of light looks like. Do you know who I am now?" That tiny golden figure gradually raised its head, and in that moment, Huo Yuhao felt as if his brain had been struck by an enormous hammer. All that doubt, suspicion, and unsurety in his mind were suddenly cleared in this instant. He finally understood why she looked so similar to Donga, and why she was closer to the goddess of light in his heart. He finally understood why she could move around in the great Star Do forest unhindered, and why she had such peculiar feelings for soul beasts, to the point where she would save those dark golden terraclaw bears. He finally understood why he would feel a sense of familiarity with her now and then, and why she possessed an eye of destiny like he did. He finally understood why she would always appear by his side every time he was in danger. He finally understood why she knew everything about him, and why she was just so familiar with him, and why she would appear beside him continuously. That was because she wasn't a human in the first place. That was because she was the one that had given him his eye of destiny. That was because she was the one that controlled destiny, and was the envoy of destiny. That was because she had looked into his memories a long time ago. She was the three-eyed golden lion. The three-eyed golden lion had left a profound impression in him in the great Star Do forest, and had given him his eye of destiny. The lion controlled the entire great Star Do forest's fate and fortunes, and was greatly beneficial and helpful to all other soul beasts within the forest. The 10 great savage beasts, and other similarly powerful soul beasts protected her in the great Star Do forest. Chioa. Chiaoa is actually the three-eyed golden lion. Huo Yuhao's spiritual sea was about to be incinerated completely at this very moment, but this sudden information caused his spirit to tremble from all that astonishment. He had been about to pass on the Ice Empress, the Snow Empress, and the Skydream Iceworm to Chiaoa, but now he had no choice but to stop. Chiaoa, you. Yes, I am the three-eyed golden lion. I am that silly and foolish three-eyed golden lion who developed an interest in you, and stepped into the world of humans. When you forcefully imprinted my eye of destiny, you were destined to be the bane of my destiny. When you read my memories that time, I did the same to you. You can only see the grand and drab forest, the great star doe forest. But in your memory, I saw the countless aspects and expressions of humanity, and I saw its beauty. I am different from other soul beasts. I'm not even limited by destiny, and I don't have that bottleneck at 100,000 years like they do. I can continue living if I am willing to, and even though I can't become as strong as Di Qian and the others, even the true dictator that's slumbering in the great star doe forest will only take good care of me. He won't let any harm come to me. But I experienced too much boredom in my several thousand years of life. How could I resist that curiosity after seeing the beauty of humanity? Therefore, I used the only chance I had in my entire lifetime to transform into a human, and I became that goddess of light in your memory. After my transformation, I was destined to only be able to transform between the three-eyed golden lion and the goddess of light, and even my name, Wang Chiaoa, was created based on Wang Dong's name. I walked into your world of humans, and I used the partial golden dragon blood in my body, and replicated the golden dragon by imitation. The world of humans was so novel and interesting to me, but it was also very unfamiliar at the same time. I gradually began to feel fear after my very brief happiness and curiosity, because I didn't understand you, and everything about the world of humans, at all. Even I don't know why I went to Shrek Academy like that, and why I appeared in front of you. We met yet again, but I had become a human. You didn't recognize me, but I recognized you, and that feeling was so peculiar and magical at the same time. Perhaps, because of the connection between our eyes of destiny, my fear disappeared when I was by your side, and I felt especially safe and assured. Therefore, I entered Shrek Academy, and arrived by your side. I wanted to see how you lived your life, and what differences there were between you humans and us soul beasts. At that moment, I discovered that the fellow who was a good friend to you was actually a girl, and the two of you had actually become lovers. I had a sour feeling in my heart at that time, and only then did I realize that the appearance that I had transformed into was how she would look when she grew up. I was beginning to feel a little overwhelmed and at a loss once more. During that time, I wanted to leave and return to the Great Star Doe Forest, because the origin power of my destiny came from the Great Star Doe Forest, and because I had snuck out in the first place. However, I couldn't bear to leave this opportunity to enter the world of humans behind. I knew that if I left just like that, returning to your side would almost be impossible even if I wanted to. Therefore, I remained, and followed you guys into the Great Star Doe Forest, so that we could find a suitable soul ring for you. I am a soul beast, yet I was helping you hunt and kill soul beasts. Wasn't that just comical? Even though I am typically bloodthirsty, and I like to kill, those soul beasts were my kin, my brethren, after all. Afterwards, I listened to you recount your story with your mother. Going through your memories and listening to you telling your story was so different, and in that moment, I suddenly realized that soul beasts and humans are just different. We are fundamentally different in our emotions and in our feelings. The emotions that humans possess are things that our soul beasts do not have, and it was in that moment that I was determined to remain. I wanted to try and see if I could be better than Dorna in your heart. I quickly discovered how unrealistic this thought was. After going through life and death with you, even I didn't know that you were becoming more and more important to me, and your impression had become stronger and stronger in my heart. Because of the mutual connection and pull between our eyes of destiny, you were my greatest predestined fate. I was starting to like you. I liked to see you, and I liked being by your side. However, you started to reject and ostracize me because of Dorna. Perhaps you felt that way, because the threat that Dorna felt from me was overly intense and overwhelming. I was even a little proud at that time. So what if we looked identical? I would be stronger than she was, and so I would snatch you from her hands. But I had no idea how to make you like me, how to make you fall in love with me. I was very lost at that time, till one day, when I watched you impatiently leave the academy with a look of anxiety and worry. My curiosity was piqued, and my curiosity made me follow you into some faraway land. Your intelligence, your determination, and your stubbornness towards Dong was continuously moving me. When I watched you swallow the blazing sunsprings water, which was hot enough to melt metal, into your belly so that you could spit out some of your own blood, do you know how I felt? That was the first time I felt heartache, and it was so painful. And it was then that I understood what love was. You could disregard your own life and sacrifice yourself for Dong, but did you ever think about how much pain I felt in my heart when I was by your side, and when I watched you become like you were? When I vomited some blood of my own and plucked another yearning heartbroken grass for you, I knew that I had already fallen in love with you, and irrevocably so. Even I felt that I was so silly and foolish, because we are different in the first place. You're a human, and I'm a soul beast. We should be completely dichotomous, but I am just so foolish, as if I am a moth being attracted to a fire, and flying straight into the flames. You hurt me so much every time, and I felt so much pain, but I couldn't bear to leave you every time. This video will end here.